So it's a great pleasure for us to be here on stage and remote. We should have two participants on remote, which will be up, I guess, in a minute. Oh, there you go. Great. So my name is Ronit Eshel. I'm the head of climate technologies in the Israel Innovation Authority. I'm very pleased to host this panel today where we'll explore some innovative technologies that will go into climate smart agriculture. I'd like to introduce our esteemed panelists. Together with me, we have Vanessa Bartam, which is the managing partner at Zora Ventures. And I'll let them introduce themselves more widely as they answer the questions. We have Dr. Orly Savion, which is the CEO at Alagene, which is a biosynthetic lab that is hosted by the Israel Innovation Authority. And online, we have two participants, Anne Williams, which is the head of protected crops at Bayer Vegetable Seeds at Bayer Crop Science, and Dr. Conrad Rein from the University of Chicago's Development Innovation Lab, representing the Innovation Commission for Climate Change, Food Security, and Agriculture. So to start off, we apologize for the delay in the timing. And so I think our first question will go to Anne, which cannot be with us for the period of the whole panel. So, Anne, it's from a multinational corporation standpoint, working in mature and developing markets, how would you say, what is the Bayer Crop Science looking for in terms of technologies to enhance crop resilience to climate variability? And how are you integrating them into your operations? Please, Anne.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. And I'm very sorry I can't be with you in Tel Aviv today. I hope you have a really great conference and discussions together in the room, out and about. And the coffee breaks particularly will be excellent. Really, in terms of, it's looking for that, as you say, crop resilience in the face of climate variability, volatility. So it's anything that makes production more secure. It takes the risk out for growers and for the food chain, and it's about, if you like, buffering that risk. So anything that has a particular impact on temperature sensitivity and how a plant can cope and adapt to that, how production can cope and adapt to that. So whether it's a way to manage the environment or whether it's a way to manage that stress on a plant. It's also looking at how cropping patterns and geographies might change and cropping environments might change. So it may be even as much as actually a completely new crop for a completely new area or a completely new environment to manage that temperature rise and temperature change and that volatility. It's obviously a key area will be input limitations, where that climate variability changes the input availability. Then that's a really critical area where we're looking at new technologies too. Now that could be the climate variability itself changes the input limitations, but actually generally inputs are not ever going to become more available than they are now. So input efficiency, input output conversion efficiency is a very significant area, and that's both in availability and in quality. So obviously water would be a key element for that. There are still areas of the world where water is very prevalent, but it could be the timing, the reliability, and the quality of that isn't good enough. And we also should be very aware of all of the other demands that we have on water, not just producing food. You can argue whether that's right or wrong, but I'm not sure anyone's going to turn their shower off if you tell them they can't have an apple if they have a shower. So we have to manage that too. And then pathogen change. Pathogen change in response to climate variability is another really significant area for us in terms of looking at areas of technology that we can bring in to look at that. How we're integrating it, we're looking at, if it's germplasm, we're looking obviously at in-house development of that in our breeding targets and our testing and selection targets. We're looking at partnerships across all sorts of spaces, whether it's gene editing to bring in key characteristics and key traits. It may be looking at bringing germplasm in. If there are good testing environments, then we work across partnerships in that too. Digital technology is obviously a significant area where we work with people in terms of that management, but it's also biologicals across the biocrop science business, and it might be post-harvest treatments as well and collaboration. So we develop at home. We are delighted to partner in terms of in-licensing and revenue contracts with collaborative partners. We are also looking at, in some cases, partnership ventures, taking things together, and acquisitions where people want that in terms of technology. So there's many partnerships in terms of joint platforms, collaboration, partnerships, licensing across that spectrum, really. It doesn't have to be grown at home to work.
Absolutely, absolutely. And I think it's really interesting that you talked about the conversion efficiency, which is probably relevant for all areas and subcategories of climate, whether it's water or food or energy or anything else that really has to do with how do you do the parity between what we know today and what will be the technology of the future. And I think in that sense, maybe Vanessa, how can investment and innovation in climate-smart agriculture technologies drive sustainable food production, if we talk specifically on that? And what is the role that Zora plays in facilitating these investments?
Thank you, Ronit. Is this working? Okay, sounds good. So at Zora, we are an early stage deep tech fund investing in purely B2B innovations, typically scientists coming out of Weitzman, out of Technion, that have found some innovation that a Fortune 100 customer is telling us, yes, we need this to do what we do more sustainably. Frequently, those corporates are under pressure because of regulatory changes, because of lawsuits and legal liability. We absolutely don't believe in altruism or in behavior change, so we're looking to find solutions that corporates can drop in one-to-one for an existing solution to do what they do better. So for us, when we look at, we invest across verticals, but we have done several investments in ag and food across the value chain, everything from very early biologicals, weed out, is an herbicide to fight resistance among superweeds, all the way to the end. We have Wasteless in the audience that does food waste through dynamic pricing that optimizes the price as products near expiration. We just made a recent investment in a company that we're very excited about, Novella, that is producing high-value plant bioactives in bioreactors. So rather than growing 2,000 hectares of something, grow the same value product in a bioreactor without throwing away 99% of the biomass. So what we're looking for at Zora, I think we're lucky to have in the Israeli ecosystem, and I think generally in the ag tech ecosystem, a lot of fantastic, I will say, marginal improvements that will improve shelf life, that will improve, pest resistance. At Zora, we are so early stage and deep tech. We are looking for the exponential changes to how we think about the issue of, we'll have 10 billion people on this planet in 2050. Under existing methods, we don't have food to feed them all. We know that food production and agriculture accounts for 26% of greenhouse gas emissions. So what are those exponential technologies that can just radically reimagine how we produce food? You heard a few examples here.
Exciting examples, and thank you for sharing that. I think that there's a lot to look forward to. And if I can talk to Conrad. Conrad, You have an extensive experience in policy and governance, and we'd like to hear from your perspective what is needed from donor and recipient governments to support the widespread adoption of climate-smart agriculture practices globally. We've heard about the investment, we've heard about the multinational corporations. It's important to get the perspective of the governments.
Yes, thank you very much, and a very good afternoon from Brussels. And first of all, congratulations for setting up PLANETech World 2024. And apologies, I cannot join you in Tel Aviv in person today. To answer the question from a development cooperation perspective, we clearly need more coordination between donor governments as well as between donor governments and governments in the Global South, shifting away from a top-down approach. All this sounds obvious, but it's not happening sufficiently. This means that in these times of limited available public funding, donor governments should be more open towards joining forces and towards co-funding of projects. In recent times, there's a lot of talk about the need to accelerate progress towards achieving the SDGs, in particular SDG 2, Zero Hunger. As we know, and as it is highlighted in the recently launched 2024 Sustainable Development Report, only 16% of the SDG targets are on track to be achieved by 2030. This means government need to think in totally different terms when it comes to addressing the hunger and climate crisis. They cannot continue business as usual. And that is what we in the Innovation Commission, chaired by Professor Michael Kramer, a Nobel laureate in economics, are promoting to scale innovations that A, have rigorous evidence of impact and cost effectiveness, and a plausible pathway to scale, and C, help millions of people. And to give you an idea of the innovations we are promoting, these include weather forecasting, digital agriculture, rainwater harvesting, climate resilient cash transfers, livestock innovations to reduce emissions, microbial fertilizers, and alternative proteins. So in a nutshell, I think governments need to get serious about challenges related to climate, land, population growth, and conflict that are unlikely, unfortunately, to decrease in the near future, and that affect actually everybody in our world. Thank you.
Thank you, Conrad. So, yeah, I think, just your summary sentence, it's not likely to decrease, and that's why we need to empower even more everything that we do for the better of the world. And I think, one of the examples is Alagene. So, Orly, you have an external R&D company. And how does Alagene and your partners leverage synthetic biology to assure food security and enhance the agricultural productivity? And I would like to hear some unique examples of the things that you're running in your labs there.
Thank you, Ronit, and thank you for my colleagues for mentioning many important things. Maybe before I start a little bit about Alagene. So Alagene is, as you mentioned, Ronit, was actually initiated because of the Israel Innovation Authority, where they found a gap that is needed for the local ecosystem. Of course, we're not just working locally, but there's an eminent need here in Israel, where we talk about how to facilitate, especially startups, academia, but also large companies, and how can we kind of answer a gap of funding, of expertise, and others. And this is where they initiated the Synthetic Biology Center. And what we do there is that it starts from engineering and designing, bioengineering, designing of new microbiology organisms. It can be yeasts, bacteria, fungi, and the purpose can be from either section. I think that this conference meets several of those. One of them is, clean tech. We talk about cleaning soils. We talk about carbon fixation, generation of food through precision fermentation. So many aspects. We see things coming from defense. We see coming from the health and pharmaceuticals areas. So it's really multidisciplinary, and we start from generating or improving these specific bacteria or fungi or whatever is the technology is set with us. We always collaborate while we're an R&D resource. We get projects from customers that are already active in a certain scope. And it can go through, high throughput screening that enables a company that has a huge library of bacteria that is doing whatever, and they want to find the best one, or a bioassay development when we want to see that something actually disassembles the things we want to disassemble, or produces in high volumes what we want to produce. And it goes to fermentation facilitation, which means that we actually construct a fermentation process, taking something from academia, like processing tubes and plates and bottles, and going into fermenters, even if it starts with small scale, and then it goes through tech transfer to large scale. And also everything that relates to downstream, where we try to find this active ingredient. It can be a protein, it can be a vitamin, it can be anything that you can think about. It can be a biofuel, right? So this is what we do in this center, and we actually, I cannot really share many things that we do. Maybe I can share a little bit about our parts.
Give us a sneak peek.
Yeah, just a sneak peek that relates actually to alternative proteins. We know that, for instance, one of the things that might give us some food security is our ability to produce food not just through conventional agriculture. And then we think about, of course, fermentation, right? Creating ingredients, proteins through usage of microbes. We can also think about growing plant cells in media instead of in soil. We can think about clean tech when we need to produce bacteria that will disassemble or will release into the environment biopesticide. Even the bacteria itself, right, can be a biofertilizer. So many aspects can be done. One thing I can mention as an active product is the cultured meat area. Everyone are familiar with, I think everyone are already familiar with the issues that it brings, and why don't we see in our homes, right, in our table and our restaurants, cultured meats yet. And the reason for that is because the development of cultured meat is really pharma-like. We cannot feed people, we cannot feed the world with something that costs like medications. And one of the things that we are part of is becoming an enabler, where we, cultured meat needs growth hormones. Growth hormones are mainly developed through mammalian cells. This is really expensive. And one of the projects that we do in a consortia through the Israel Innovation Authority is reducing the cost of this in about 1,000 times less, which is dramatic, right? This is a true enabler. So I think that the place that we see this whole thing, first of all, we see all the multidisciplinary activity that is being done. We're seeing every kind of company that relates to biology, relates to microbiology, can work with us, and we can see what is needed, and also constructing, right? There are so many levels in this development, and we are really attached to one of these, but we're just a part of the whole picture.
Sounds like you're a big part of the whole picture, so it's great to have you here. And you mentioned a few of those technologies, and I'd like to I'll go back to Anne, if we still can do that. I think Orly mentioned quite a few sneak peeks on agriculture, biotechnology. 10 years from now, where do you see, what are the products that really excite you in Bayer? Where do you see Bayer going into and, launching some agriculture, biotechnology that play a role in climate resilience and security?
Well, I'm definitely going down Orly's list and go, maybe we should talk about that. So there's some really very, very interesting things that you discussed there. So it will be very interesting to follow up on those afterwards. What do I think will play a role particularly? The input efficiency, we discussed that input-output conversion ratio. We have to get better at that because we're never going to have more inputs than we have. So we need to get much, much better at converting them into outputs. So part of that from a germplasm perspective is actually looking at the ratio of architecture, if you like, looking at the architecture of the plants we use as food products, so that we either make sure that more of that product can be used, more of the plant can be used, whether it's two purposes, a primary purpose and a secondary purpose, or we look at altering the architecture so there's just more and more and more of the food product and less of the secondary product. So that's part of it. Nitrogen fixing, I would expect a lot more coming in terms of that, and a lot less use of synthetic hydrocarbon production of nitrogen, because it's just not going to be available. Photovoltaics, they're a really interesting area for me. We have a lot of glass and a lot of plastic, and it could do several jobs at the same time, I think. So obviously, again, hydrocarbon energy is not going to get any more available, and it's not going to get any less expensive. But in areas particularly, I mean, if you look at the Arava Valley, if you look at Eshel, in those areas, you have so much sunlight, particularly in Israel, around the Mediterranean countries. There's a lot we should be able to do much, much more with that. So photovoltaics, for me, are a really interesting one in the hot and cold places. Digital, moving from analysis to prediction, to increase that efficiency and to move further. I think we're also, you talked about substrates, Orly, and I think that's more active substrates, very smart substrates, rather than we look at peat, we look at cocoa peat, we look at soil, we look at things like that, but actually rock wool, much more intelligent substrates that are more functional and contribute more, rather than what they do now, I think will be part of that. I think we'll see a lot more post-harvest too, in terms of that. Input-output efficiency and conversion is one thing, but it's also food waste. Food waste is such a massive impact. It's probably contributing as much as the input efficiency as far we do. So in terms of that management of produce quality, in terms of making it look and taste better, so people are more likely to eat it, and look and taste better for longer, I'm saying, in that premium condition, because we still have to get food to people everywhere. So that if we waste less, it's better for the food value chain as we go. So I think there are some of the areas in terms of that.
Great, thank you. I think that you mentioned intelligence. Definitely 10 years from now, and maybe 10 years is not a lot, but we'll see a lot more intelligence. We'll see a lot more of the new materials that you mentioned, using biotechnology for those technology innovations. Is going to be exciting, absolutely exciting. I'd like to address a question to both Conrad and Vanessa. I think that there's a big role for the public-private partnerships, and I'd like to get your take on what is that role in enhancing the effectiveness and the reach of climate-smart agriculture initiatives. Let's start with Vanessa.
Sure. I think from early stage, our vantage point, we look at it, what should we stop doing that's causing damage, and what are the things that we should be accelerating or starting to do if we've not done them before. So, this is less, I think, PPP and more on the regulatory policy side, particularly in the U.S. market, where we have quite a focus. Obviously, the subsidization of traditional agriculture and factory farming means that all of our companies that are going out with a more effective, sustainable, climate-friendly solution have a higher hurdle to become competitive. So to stop subsidizing industries with horrific environmental externalities is would be a wonderful starting point. In terms of what we have started doing and need to be accelerating, our last panel spoke, to this Ram and Ellie, facilitate the carbon credits market, and to be able to help drive the transition to regenerative agriculture by actually putting a price on carbon, and importantly, giving value to growers who are implementing, sustainable practices is a huge one.
It's definitely a huge one. Conrad?
Yes, thank you. I will reflect again on this question from a development cooperation perspective. There has been a lot of talk about engaging with the private sector during the last decades, but I have not seen it happening at a large enough scale to address hunger adequately around the world. Hunger is on the rise, and governments are not serious enough about tackling it. Massive funding is needed, and I see that funding only coming from the private sector, given the current financial, economic, and political constraints encountered by donor governments around the world. In general, governments seem to be more concerned about the problems engagement with the private sector could potentially bring rather than the solutions. So I think we also need a little bit a shift of narrative. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very interesting key takeaway, I think, to make sure that we put the right focus on the problems, not just the solutions. And to relate to that and the hunger that you spoke about, I think considering the urgent need for global food security, and this is a question that I'd like to address to all of you, if we can take that. What are some of the immediate actions that stakeholders in the agricultural sector can take to mitigate the impacts of climate change on food production? So give us your key takeaway of how can we really handle the global food production that's going to be sustainable for years to come. As you said, 2050 is not enough food for everyone. So Orly, do you want to start?
Sure. I think it's a really combination of things. There are some enablers that we are already facing today. Some of the things are faster to develop, and you can say that about the digitalization, right? AI-based tools, image analysis tools, and there we can help, the whole food chain in all aspects, beginning, diseases, when to crop, after harvest. And this is the most immediate one. I think that one of the things that are happening there, maybe a bit slower, are the whole answers of bio-crop protection. And we see that regulation already prohibited the usage of, if we can call it conventional, right? Conventional pesticides, but they didn't really expedite in any way the other aspects that can answer, and we're losing food, right? Because, agriculture-wise, we don't have any other solutions. So I think this is something that can be expedited. I don't want to take too much time of my panelists.
Thank you. Thank you. Anne, would you like to add to that?
Yes, I think that's an excellent point, actually, Orly. For me, I think I'd like to see clarity and a little more common direction in terms of, I think, gene editing technology. We have obviously a regulatory structure in place in the US and Canada. Chile has has a structure in place, and Japan does, but outside that, most of the rest of the world is deciding what they do about what is, in effect, a very smart pair of scissors, almost, allowing us to accelerate breeding within a species, using what's there and just make it go faster. So I think in terms particularly of that management of climate volatility and change, the ability to, in effect, accelerate the breeding that we're already doing using gene editing is going to be a very valuable tool. So that's something I'd like to see more clarity about how we make that available to more markets.
Great, thanks. In a word, in a nutshell, Conrad?
If you allow me a few sentences. So I believe governments need to get seriously and massively scale innovations that feed millions of people and not continue business as usual with small and medium-sized development projects here and there. What hasn't worked for 60 years won't work now. We know the problems, we have the solutions, so we just need to act. And of course, this also means involving the private sector at a very large scale. Thank you.
Perfect. And Vanessa? private
I think
sector?
we need more of what we already have. Some of us of this in this room are fantastic Israeli entrepreneurs with huge vision and ways to radically reimagine how we grow and build our food, produce our food. We hear increasingly from companies like ADM that say our basic inputs and ingredients we can't find because weather patterns are changing. It's not an easy space to be in as an entrepreneur. You get to iterate your product maybe twice a year if you're lucky. Regulatory, slow, etc. We need fantastic people like the people in this room.
I think that sums up the whole discussion perfectly. We need perfect people and wonderful people to make this work, and we will make it work. Thank you so much, all the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Ronit.